President Trump defended his tariff policy before the National Republican Congressional dinner on Tuesday night. He declared the plan will actually help House Republicans in 2026, but not all GOPers in Congress are necessarily buying that.
Senate Republicans moved to curb Trump's power on tariffs, introducing the Bipartisan Trade Review Act last week. It would limit Trump's ability to impose unilateral tariffs without the approval of Congress.
The White House and Republican leadership pounced on the bill, putting a pause on it for now. Joining us to dive into the political games happening on Capitol Hill right now is Burgess Everett, the Congressional Bureau Chief for Semafor. Welcome back to Rising.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great to see you. I think what everybody is wondering is behind, closed doors, how are Republican elected leaders, I guess particularly in the House and people who will be up for re-election, thinking about the impact of the tariffs. Publicly, it's with a few exceptions, it's all very, backing President Trump, not wanting to go against him. Are they much more nervous behind the scenes?
Yeah, and I think even publicly, because you hear people like Senator Tillis, Senator Ted Cruz talking about basically there's a shelf life to how long that they're willing to let the president keep going with this. I think they think that could be some temporary pain and they're willing to stomach that. And I think that translates all the way up to the top of the Republican leadership. But most of these folks that we're talking to want the trade wars to end or at least come to a pause, start making some deals ASAP. This ranges from people who have clashed with President Trump in the past to people who are some of his closest allies. So, I think that there's certainly private panic, but I think a lot of it is spilling out in public as well. I mean, the bill that you referenced, the Trade Review Act, I don't expect that to pass anytime soon. But the fact that it exists and has 7 Republican co-sponsors, combined with the fact that 4 Republicans joined with Democrats to overturn the Canada tariffs in the Senate last week, tells you, we're only 3 months into the Trump administration, and he's already issuing veto threats against a bill supported by his own party. That's a pretty fast escalation of an intra-party clash.
Yeah, the clash is illustrated by people like Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, feuding very much in public now, with Elon using some of his characteristically spicy language to describe Peter Navarro. And I see members of the administration, like Scott Bessent, for instance, will try to defend the tariffs basically by saying this is a short-term diplomatic measure in order to have tariffs go to zero everywhere, which is what Elon wants, but clearly not what Peter Navarro and more bring back the manufacturing type people, which I think leaves us with the question, but where is Trump with this? Is Trump, seeing the numbers, seeing the market reactions, he is a businessman, and saying, oh crap, there might be only so long we can do this? Or is he on the no, we gotta bring back the manufacturing? Are those people actually reading his intentions correctly? Is there any, do Republicans on Capitol Hill know that for sure?
I think that Republicans that we talked to this week, Semafor, my colleagues, had a big story about this yesterday, how Republicans are not hearing a coherent, consistent message from the administration, Trump's economic team, et cetera, who are giving them extremely mixed messages. The president himself is urging folks to be cool today. That tells me that he's going to stay the course, at least for now. Now, that being said, the president is obviously someone who pays attention to the stock market. He's tweeted about it many times. So there's no way that he doesn't know what's going on here. And he's somebody who also can change direction and change strategies extremely quickly. So that's part of what makes this so difficult. I don't know that you can 100% trust or read into too much what anybody other than President Trump is saying about this. And President Trump can change his mind on a whim and do a 180. So that being said, we're all just paying attention, I think, to what he says. And that would be the advice that I'd give anybody who's watching this super closely is what is the president saying? You can factor in a little bit what Scott Bessent is saying, what Peter Navarro is saying, but it really all just comes down to Trump, because the way he implemented this is a combination of all of these different things that his economic team has been talking about. And I don't think any other person would have done these many tariffs all together in such quick succession.
You know, the reason there's no consistent or coherent message coming out of the White House is because there isn't one. And over the last 2 days, people have begun to see that. You know, this idea that he's such a great businessman. He's bankrupted every company that he's ever been in. He is a chaos agent, including in business, and people are beginning to realize that. Everybody's down to the point of just trying to psychoanalyze what he could be thinking. You know, a sign of a good business leader has to do with stability, it has to do with consistency, and yes, it has to do with coherency. That's why all these billionaire major CEOs are trying to call the White House and saying, what is he doing? So it's interesting to me about Republican politicians, because before it was all, I have to go with Trump to save my career. We're now transitioning into a time where I think it'll be very interesting whether in the next few weeks some of these Republicans will be saying, I have to break from him in order to save my career. Because if our economy continues to tank and people begin to seriously suffer, these Republicans will have more of a risk on their hands if they go with the president than if they break with him.
Yeah, and the challenge for them is that there's still Republican primaries for the midterms, right? And so if you break with President Trump before those, you risk getting a primary challenger that the president could support that could knock you off before the general election. So you see this, people in Texas and North Carolina, states that typically have early Republican primaries, they're going to have a hard time breaking with Trump until those primaries are over. So, you know, I certainly agree with the sentiment that at some point, if things don't turn around, Republicans are going to have to find independent streaks and challenge the president on these things. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think it could be not only months, it could be a year from now when the general election starts setting up. And who knows what the economy is going to look like then. So that's why you don't see Republicans racing to break with Trump, other than those who have made very clear that they are free traders and they don't agree with Trump's tariff policies from the go.
They could also go to the kind of familiar well of saying that, saying they're not breaking with Trump, right? No, Trump is still the greatest human being who's ever lived. Got to say that because I'm a Republican running for re-election. But he, a savior of humanity, but he's being, hoodwinked by the deep state that's got, he's being undermined by people with it. Like, there can still be an inner factional battle, like you're seeing frankly, with Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, that's saying, well, Trump is trying to, you're trying to sabotage Trump. No, you're trying to sabotage Trump. That's how I see this developing over the next couple of weeks if we stick with the tariff policy.
I think certainly there could be a fall guy and somebody who ends up taking a lot of the blame in the Trump administration rather than the president himself. Because as you said, it doesn't make any sense for folks who need the president's support to criticize him directly. I mean, think if you're like Senator John Cornyn, who you have Ken Paxton running against you in a primary, you're a strong general election candidate and you know that, but it's going to be impossible for him to criticize Trump because Ken Paxton is already amplifying past concerns that Cornyn made years ago at this point. So he's really under the microscope, and that's just one example of all of these Republicans that have to juggle those two things: general election waiting next November and 2026, and getting through this primary season. So I do see that there will probably be some blame that goes to the administration, but not directly to the president.
One of the problems I have with these narratives is that everybody's supposed to simply understand how difficult it is for these people to make the decision. Sometimes I feel like politicians think they're the only people who have to make ethical decisions at work. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, people are going to have to start putting their country before their party, put their country before their president. There's nothing patriotic about that. What's patriotic is doing what's best for the people of the United States, and tanking the economy it's beginning to be a less and less compelling argument every hour that somehow this is going to be good for the people of the United States. So we'll see what happens.
Burgess Everett, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Our next guest says tariffs are actually just course correcting. We have a pro-tariff guest, and we'll discuss all these policies with them. Stay tuned.